Okay, we're in for a real treat. Achron Chaviv. We're really truly honored to have the Mar D'Asra, who's really the leader of our synagogue and a major leader in the community, Rabbi David Katz, talking to us. Thank you.
Hi. I tell you the truth is I feel a little funny now after listening to people actually know what they're talking about. The shame, I know it goes in these winter evenings. A lot of people are running around doing things, but these are very high quality talks we just heard. They're short, sweet, but everybody knows what they're talking about, as opposed to what you're about to hear. But since you don't know the difference anyway, so it doesn't matter. But I do want to commend Jerry Insel, who does this lishma. He really is concerned about the health of the community, and to him, medicine is not simply a matter of money or anything like that, but it's really about health. The original plan was I was going to speak first because that's what I usually do, and then I get out of the way. You can hear real people talk about real items. I just had something from my department. The head of my department had bar mitzvahs making tapes. I had to go to that first, based on the principle of Chayecha Kodman. But therefore, I told him just leave me for the end. So, even though I feel a little bit funny about speaking about history in a medical symposium, but nevertheless, I have a story that you perhaps will find interesting. But I did find out the difference between a rabbi and a anesthesiologist based on what Dr. Helder Eldbaum just said, because we're both in the same business of putting people to sleep. But no, there is a difference. 0.4 of her patients wake up. With a rabbi.
She said it takes 30 seconds.
What's that?
She said it takes 30
Yeah,
seconds.
we can beat that. Yeah, it takes 30 seconds to put them to sleep. We could beat that.
They can remember the
Yeah, that's it. So I entitled the talk, which will not be very long. That's a lie, of course. But anyway, as none are so blind as those who will not see, a medical tale about the Shus Yaakov. Here we're talking about, as he said, taking back to the 17th and 18th century. I just thought what would be an interesting story that some from Jewish history had some impact on biblical literature that some or other comes in contact with medicine. And this caught my eye a number of years ago. We're dealing over here in the old days when doctors actually knew everything, as opposed to the skepticism that characterizes the competent practitioner today. The people you heard are aware of the limitations of it. Once upon a time, it wasn't like that. Medicine was great. There were like 5 books or 10 books you had to know, and then you knew everything on the subject, right? And still in the 17th century, I guess, is when things started to change. Until then, they still used the old medicine. So it's amazing. For century after century, the doctors killed you, but people got well paid for it. No comment. Anyway, Rabbi Yaakov Reisher, I'm going to pick a name from the famous rabbis of old, what they call the Achronim. This takes us back to a period in which rabbis were not clergymen as they have become in America today, but rather you have what you call the Al Bezdin system, which is Europe. Would be, if you looked at a map of Europe, let's go to the next one, I think. Yeah, if you looked at a map of Europe, say in the 1700s, when he's running around, so you saw this particular map, and just imagine 100 dots or 200 dots all over the place, and each one represent a Jewish community. And in those days, they're kehillas, that are autonomous, coercive Jewish communities, which means that wherever they were, whether in France or in the German states or Poland, obviously, on the left, Jake, I don't see it. Is this it?
Yeah, you can use that one.
How you do it? I went to college.
That's the one at the...
What happened to the regular one? Okay. Fine. Thank you. If you went all over Europe, in the time I'm talking about, from Italy, not Spain, but Italy and France, and especially here, there literally would be hundreds and hundreds of places in which the Jews lived in community situations, and in each case, almost in every case, the Gentile state allowed the Jewish community, granted the Jewish community a certain amount of autonomy, and therefore that means that they could rule themselves in a number of areas, and therefore they're coercive. If you didn't follow the rules of the community, you'd be punished in one way or another. This is the good old days before religious tolerance, because when people really knew what God wanted, then religious tolerance has no place. Nowadays, in modern times, people are very skeptical. Does God exist, or do we know what's happening? So therefore, it's called the Enlightenment, So then they started saying maybe you can't force somebody to do something. When you knew for sure, then of course you can. So when you had these kahillas, which were all over the map over here, so by the time I'm talking about, by the 1600s, they assumed a certain crystallized form, and basically, every kahilla, every Jewish community is constituted of and you have to belong to this according to the Gentile law, or convert to another religion. So let's say, for example, about Berlin, I don't know off the top of my head, or some place like that. All the Jews living in Berlin had to be, by definition, members of this community. You pay your taxes to the community, not to the state. The community pays the taxes in a lump sum to the state, and you can't be Machal Shabbos. You open your store on Shabbos, the community can punish you, and they will. Okay, for example. Now, who makes the rules and all the rest of it? Well, it's the rich. There's a system of election, but just like in America, it's all controlled by the rich. Now, on the other hand, there are limitations to what the rich can do. What are the limitations? Well, they can't tell you to be Machal Shabbos. Not in those days. Can't tell you to eat treif. So what defines what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do? That's why they needed what they called the Al-Bezins. They needed people to run the Jewish court systems, because every place I'm talking about, all those hundreds of dots had a separate court. So there was a whole world of Bezins of their own, and each one was a separate state, like John C. Calhoun, states' rights. Nobody could tell anybody else what to do. And each one, if they were able to, tried to get an Al-Bezin, which was a chief rabbi to preside over it, a scholar of great renown, and that way, if he says that what the community is doing is right, then it has traction. So if you're old enough to remember Moshe Feinstein in America, if I say like this, they did this, and Moshe Feinstein says you can do it, then people say, okay. So these are what they call the Al-Bezins, the Achorim, the great rabbis of old, and they're of a certain type. The person I'm talking about is known by the books that he published as the Shus Yaakov, Rabbi Yaakov Reischer, lived from 1661 to 1733, so late 1600s, early 1700s, and he was a typical Al-Bezin of the type I'm talking about. These guys didn't get up and give speeches. They didn't visit people in the hospital. They didn't do all the stupid things that we associate with clergy today, to which the rabbinate degenerated into. You understand? They didn't go and try to flatter people, at some bar mitzvah and say things about them that aren't true. This is before all that. This is before. It wasn't expected. Instead, an Al-Bezin was expected to preside over the court system, run a little yeshiva, so if the community can afford a larger yeshiva, and live and set an example. Perhaps the most important role is to set an example in lifestyle and learning of the way everybody else should be. Nobody else is going to be exactly like that, but at least that's what I'd like to be, 10%, 20%, or whatever. And so there was a career system, not formal but real, and usually you start at a small community, end up in a bigger community, another community, and it was a matter of a salary. You understand? If you want a bigger hill, you get a bigger salary, and you move to another place. First of all, you need the money. Second of all, you could use that to build a bigger yeshiva to run. Now, so the person I'm talking about, Yaakov Reischer, was really born in Prague, from a very elite family, and he learned by the right people, as they say today, and he was related to the right people. He ended up marrying the right kind of family, and therefore already when he's 15 and 20 years old, he's in Eloy. The type you read about, he ended up having his first position in Russia, which is in Poland. When Poland being, let's go back to the map. Let's go back to the map. Yeah, okay. Yeah, Poland being Rov Minyan, Rome Binyan, Klal Yisrael. Most of the Jews of the world lived in Poland, and that was true until Hitler. Well, till early 20th century, until 1900. I'll say it again. Most of the Jews of the world lived in Poland, more than 50%, well over 50%. What you call Russian Jewry, there's no such thing. It's just that Russia took over this area, so therefore they got all the Polish Jews. So no such thing as Russian Yidden, right? So we call Lithuanian, Litvaks, Galicianers, and all the rest are part of what you call Polish Jewry. The old Poland that I'm pointing to, which you see was very large and no longer exists. That's it. Ukraine, all these things are just part of the Polish Jewry. So his first Stella was over there. Then he moved to Germany, because in Germany you had a wealthier, they would pay better salaries. So he's in Ansbach and Worms, and then in Metz, in France. France, being a place where it's French, but they conquered Alsace-Lorraine, and therefore they had a bunch of German Jews to France. Now, all that is probably boring to you. I just laid that aside to set up the story. Okay? Now, here's a person who lived this kind of a life and was a rabbi in this place and it was a big yeshiva, and he was a big halacha guy, so therefore early on in his life people start sending him shilas, which he eventually published in many books. And without getting into too many details, he was a halachic expert. The most important eventful decade in his life is the year 1710 to 1720. Okay? He was a rabbi in Resha in Poland from 1690 to 1709, then in Ansbach from 1709 to 1713. So for 4 years, from 1709 to 1713. Then he leaves for some reason, goes back to his beloved city Prague, because Prague was the Lakewood of those days. Okay, that's a place where you had 11,000 Jews, which was gigantic by the standard in those days. A lot of different little yeshivas in the Prague ghetto. Haven't gotten to that trip yet, but we will. And was really pulsating with Jewish life in an amazing way. At a time when Vilna had 2,000 Jews, Prague had like 11,000. So, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Now, the trouble is, I said it's an eventful decade. 1713, all of a sudden an epidemic hits Prague, as happened in those days. And the only thing you do is hit the road. So we know the old-fashioned medicine, which actually works, is if there's a plague there, run. Okay, here's the Ramah, and a very famous sefer, some are familiar with it. He wrote in Megillah Esther, the Mechir Yayin, and he says, I'm composing this in the woods, like 100 miles away from Krakow, because an epidemic broke out. All we know is we just dropped everything, and we ran and hit the road to the mountains, and here I am on Purim, and I've got nothing better to do, so I'm writing a commentary on the Megillah Esther, which he did. A philosophical commentary. And that actually, I'm told, is the only piece of sound medicine from those days, because if there is a plague, get the heck out of there, right? Now, in the absence of Sfarim, once he's on the road, because here's a person that lived with, the Gemara, the Rashi, the Rambam, the classic Sfarim you need for the tricks, the tools of the trade, to be a posek, to be Rosh Hashiva, and now all that is gone because he's in hiding or in exile in the countryside. So he said, well, I have to concentrate on the dumb stuff, which is Agadata. Because if you're a real learner, then you look at Agadata as like secondary. And Agadata is the parts of the Gemara which are non-legal, like the stories. And all he has is Ein Yaakov. And Ein Yaakov, perhaps many will know, is the famous collection that was put together in the 16th century of all the stories of the Gemara. You just lift it out by Yaakov ben Chabib. And so, stories in the Gemara are not so easy a lot of times. And what do they mean? And sometimes they're deep philosophical meaning, the metaphors, and how do you decode them? And so this is what he throws himself into. And he writes up a lot, but he doesn't publish it for many years, as you'll see in a second. Meanwhile, while he's wandering over here, people found out about him, and he got an offer to be a rabbi in Worms, far away in Germany, and he took the job. Here he established an important yeshiva. Worms is in the Rhine, and as a result, you have a big, important community. But here you run into politics, because I said before, the rich people run the community. Every rich person has his candidate who should be the Bezin. Usually there were big factions that fought each other. Of course, in America, we all live in peace and harmony. But in those days, you used to have every hill had 2 or 3 rich families that they all tried to stuff their own candidates in. A lot of dirty politics was in there. So he was put in by one faction, obviously, and the other factions tried to drive his life crazy. He had a cantankerous personality, which earned him a lot of enemies, meaning he wasn't into the flattery. And so he was no, how should I put this politely? He was no respecter of persons. Let's use that. We're in a show. Now, as a result, his foes in the Kehillah. Now, this is wonderful. Worms is not that large of a city. Ari and Heather were there not long ago. I mean, it's a city, but, we're going back to the 1700s. And probably 4,000 or 5,000 people, I would imagine, total. So how big is the Jewish community? Big enough to have fights. Okay? Big enough to have fights. And so as a result, his foes in the Kehillah embittered his life. He was no shrinking wallflower. And so he lashed out at them. And when he publishes the Sefer a little bit later, using flowery rabbinic Hebrew, here he gives them hell. And he says, Pagubi Sonai Chinam, all my enemies. This is in the introduction to the Shus Yaakov, Chelik Beis. I was attacked by enemies who had no reason to hate me. The kin of Esiniyah Nafani, through hatred and jealousy. They persecuted me, and they increased in numbers my enemies, to speak ill against me, or better yet, to say lies about me. I'm a victim of slander, misrepresentation. Hashem Rav Ani, and God took up my cause. Bekinas Kinasi, and he was zealous on my behalf. In other words, I didn't have to do anything. Misfortune struck my enemies. And all those who were trying to do bad to me turned out to, in the end, be embarrassed and come to a bad end. This is expression from the Gemara. And the eyes who wanted to see my downfall, their eyes fell out. Okay? So you have to be very good at rabbinic and flowery Hebrew for this to happen. So basically what he's saying is like this. They drove me crazy. As a result, I got a better stellar. They drove me crazy in town. I tried to run a yeshiva, tried to be a rabbi in the shul and all the rest of it. And they made so many fights. The result was that they suffered misfortune and I got a promotion. I went to a bigger kehillah because Metz was the richest community in Western Europe. And so that's where he has it. Now, what's my point in telling you this? He left Worms and stormy politics. In 1718 became the rabbi in Metz, which is a larger community. And that's where he wrote these words not long after because he published the second volume of his response the year after he came there. Not long after he published these words, he went blind. That's what makes it a great story. But we ain't finished yet. He went blind. He says so in the book he wrote. Okay? And you just imagine over here a 50-something hot gadol, knows everything, big posek, and ambitious communal rabbi at the peak of his career, and all of a sudden loses sight. That's a terrible thing. It shouldn't happen to anybody, but particularly over here. Chastened, he saw the error of his ways, meaning he's not just some halacha machine, he's a from Jew. And so he asked himself the question, why did God do this to me? Why did God do this to me? This is kind of weird. All of a sudden I lost my sight. And so he came to see that he had been wrong in wishing blindness on others, no matter how poetically or rhetorically. Because when he wrote this over here, it's just a phrase from the Talmud. But it's bad luck. You don't say, oh, the eyes of people who wish misfortune on me, lost their eyes, or should lose their eyes, or something like that. It's we say, tiftach peleson. It's bad way of operating. Yeah, I don't like to use the word karma, but okay, but you like it. Okay, you're that type of guy. So, anyway, but it didn't matter because he was blind. It didn't matter, he's blind. But to a believer, it's never too late. So he prayed to God. This is all written in the introductions to his books. Acknowledging his sin. This is a very, much like a pious tactic. I know why I slipped. This is not for Dr. Anselov. I know why I slipped yesterday. I get it. So you don't need to do that to me again. Right? I know why my car all of a sudden needed a $750 repair and something like that. I get it. You won't have to do it again. It's no longer necessary to administer the punishment. He even says so. I thought, oh my goodness, has all my hope gone? Because I went blind? I justified the misfortune that struck me. Because I realized that when I published the volume that I just told you about a minute ago, volume 2 of his sponsor works, I put in there curses to my enemies. I said that phrase I should never have used, that I hope their eyes fall out, those who seek to view my downfall. Those pula sotni. I realize now this was Satan inquiring me to do something that was unworthy of a person to me. Pula sotni. This is sotni. This was the work of my enemy, of the Satan. And I should have remembered what they say in the Gemara. Better be cursed than be a curser. There's a famous Gemara in Sanhedrin where it says King David at one point got angry and cursed Yoav. And he said, I hope your children have this, that, and the other. And his kids got it. They go down the list. So don't hurl curses and imprecations at others because it'll hit you. Al-Kain Oshim Kaseni. And therefore, as we said, nice turn of phrase from Tachman, Therefore, my eyes have now become dimmed because of my rage. I lost my sight. And, let's put it this way. What do? So he's a very pious person. So there's hope against hope. Right? When we talk tzara karasi, in the midst of my tzaras, I called, V'shivati l'Hashem shirpeni, and I prayed to God in spite of everything, restore my sight. Ruach kodshcha neviv tismecheni. Give me some of your Ruach, the Holy Spirit. Don't give me the death, because to a scholar, blindness is death. Okay? But with Torah I'll use the Torah to enlighten my eyes, which is a double entendre. Shema Hashem kol Yaakov al tesheni v'al tezveni. Listen to the voice of Yaakov, that's his name. Mechatasi tareni v'sasum chachmatoni. And in darkness is what it means over in areas sealed up. Show me chacham again. No, give me a break. Do a miracle over here. Okay? Well, son of a gun. I know how it happened, but the following year in 1720, that's a long time ago, he got a cataract operation. It turned out it wasn't blindness. Right? And he says that he said, Ushnaz tough pay with tough pay olive. He had in 2 years, now there was no, I don't even imagine, there was no anesthesia at that time, right? This is 60 years before American Revolution or so, just about. So I know he did. But in the year 1720, and then another one in the year 1721. So one in the right eye, one in the left eye. Nishmat tfilasi v'chaneni l'shloch li rofe mumche. The good Lord heard my prayers and sent me a doctor who knew what he's doing. La'asir mimeni makas hasinbor, to remove from me the mark of blindness, which obviously means a cataract. Mismoli yamini, one in the left eye and then in the right eye. It's not, maybe some of the doctors here know, but I doubt it, because you have no medical history. Who did, obviously they must have done cataracts or something like that long ago in the early 18th century, but it's pretty shocking. And so, what was his result? He had Chesed Mason. He had a new burst on life. Because again, imagine a person who lives entirely for intellectual, they can't read, can't see. And so really for him it's a rebirth. And as a result, he says, this is very fine, all those commentaries and writings I did when I was in the running away from the epidemic on the Ein Yaakov, I'm going to publish now a sefer called Iyun Yaakov. The Ein Yaakov is the eye of Jacob. You can read it that way. So it's Ayin Tachas Ayin. So I fulfilled the vow in 2 ways. First of all, I'm going to keep my mouth shut and never curse people again. I get it. You don't have to do that twice. And number 2, Ayin Tachas Ayin, I will hope to repay by adding something good to the Torah literature. And therefore, if you ever get the very famous Sefer Ein Yaakov, which is published all the time, it has all the collections of the Talmud, you'll see they have this commentary, and right over here, Iyun Yaakov, and it says, Go Rabbi Yaakov Reisher, Chavish Sefer Shus Yaakov. And therefore, to conclude, it's not my place to say so because I'm not a doctor, but, let's put it this way. As people were mentioning here tonight, you have the illness, you have all the rest of it, and then you have to evaluate with lifestyle changes. There's a certain type of lifestyle change, but I would imagine the person that has an illness and does no lifestyle change, which there are plenty of people, that's not too smart. I'm talking about from a medical point of view. From a spiritual point of view, I'm not going to put you to sleep. Good night.
We want to thank the rabbi for talking. We really appreciate the rabbi being here and all the speakers. We also want to thank our support staff led by Jake Shugman.
Oh, you said that.
Klugman, Mr. Wetstein, Yossi Wetstein, Avram Klugman. And we want to thank Pacey for helping out the handouts out there.
Very good.
And Menashe has a great buffet for us right now. So it's a perfect time to eat, 9:20. It's a healthy time to eat. So let's go.
It makes it work well,
I would love to pick your mind about